Okay. Shall we then begin? Since you're here, Norman, I figure we can start now. And let me first just go through the list of stories that we're going to talk about this week. It's the story I have as top news is Philip Morris calls for a ban on cigarettes within the next decade. And to me, this is the reason I put this as the top story is I remember the day when the cigarette companies were still busy denying any connection with cancer. And for the maker of Marlboros to say, uh, we're going to stop selling cigarettes seems to me to be a pretty profound change in attitude. In technology, the story I want to talk about is, can AI chatbots help fill the empathy gap? There is in America now an epidemic of loneliness. And can chatbots help? It turns out chatbots are also fairly popular with people of our age. And I think so far they don't have the empathy programs turned on to that. When Carol has Alexa on, I don't get much empathy from it, but maybe we need an upgrade. Then in materials, they now have the thinnest read-write CD, and it's an atomic scale. And so data storage now, at least optical data storage, is gonna get very much smaller and faster and lower in energy. In space, the article is Whitey on Mars, Elon Musk and the rise of Silicon Valley's strange trickle-down science. And the question really is a mission to Mars morally defensible given today's real needs and the problems in the world? Then in the environment, companies in Maine now will have to pay to help fix the broken recycling system. And this is the first in the country law that requires companies to pay fees for the packaging they create. And if their packaging is recyclable, or if they use less packaging, they're going to pay less. So this is something I think we need here and everywhere. Then in biology, there is an RNA breakthrough that creates crops that can grow 50% more potatoes, rice, and they're sure that it'll have broader applicability. That's all they've tested so far. But 50% more food from the plants that are grown seems like that that will help the world. Then our human story this week is about a man who couldn't get over his fiance's death. So he brought her back using an advanced AI chat box. And so he was able to have chat conversations with his long lost love. And with him, it actually helped him heal from the process and get on with his life 8 years after she died. So he had been going through a long process, and the chat box helped him get through it. And then the final story, the medical story for the week, is that scientists reverse the age-related memory loss in mice. And they are fairly certain that this is going to lead to the development of treatments to prevent or reverse the memory loss of people as they age. And I feel like I want to take that pill right now. So, proceeding with the stories, first, Philip Morris, and they're calling for a ban on cigarettes. Their chief executive of the international Philip Morris, their tobacco business, has called on the UK government to ban cigarettes within this decade. And this would be a move that would outlaw Philip Morris from selling Marlboros. And they have said that the company wants to see a world without cigarettes, and that they actually think the sooner is the better for everybody. It's such a health problem. And they are saying they want to have people have a choice of a smoke-free alternative. So it sure sounds like they're going to be making cigarette vapes and stuff like this, which may be more harmful than cigarettes. I don't know. I've heard bad things. But they're saying you can solve the problem once and forever. And it said that it wants to reduce by half or more its revenue from non-smoking products as well. And what it's busy trying to do is to change into a health care and wellness company. And I guess that's right, Norman. I guess they figure it's hard to do that and still sell Marlboros. And it's interesting that right now in Philip Morris worldwide, they have executive pay tied to its new mission to, quote, unsmoke the world. And by phasing out cigarettes, and they're paying their executives bonuses based on how effective they are at unsmoking the world. And so tobacco companies are positioning themselves as a part of the solution to a smoke-free world, even while at the same time they're aggressively selling and promoting cigarettes, especially in places like Asia, and I bet Mexico. So what do you think about this? Do you think with Philip Morris's leadership, we're going to unsmoke the world? You're muted, Norman.
Well, anyway, I had some thoughts on that. You know, you really can't blame companies for seeing the writing on the wall and then looking for other ways to make money because they don't give a damn whether people smoke or don't smoke. They're only interested in making money, and I'm certain they have a good income from their cigarettes, and so if they're plowing it into things that are less harmful, then I think we should be happy that that's what they're doing.
Well, I think they've been very successful at getting people smoking.
You're right.
Can you imagine? Imagine if they use those techniques to get them to stop smoking. They're only about 45 or maybe 50 years behind. And how many deaths from cigarette smoking? Yeah. Crazy.
But I've been wondering the same thing about running advertising favoring vaccinations. If selling cigarettes is so effective with TV ads, what about vaccines?
Good question. What I remember as a kid 60 years ago was in Texas visiting my grandmother and step grandfather, and the grandfather, Curly was what they called him, had operation for lung cancer from cigarette smoking. And I remember driving with him to go to his family's farm in his pickup truck, and there he was smoking like mad.
Yeah.
There's a gray market right now for cigarettes. Somebody's just been caught bringing into Canada a bunch of cigarettes and cigars and everything. So I think the gray market will pick it up.
I bet you're right. Then maybe you'd have to go to your cartel to get your cigarettes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that Philip Morris don't give a damn. I mean, all the members of that board of directors, if they lost their jobs tomorrow, they're still all millionaires. They could still all retire, you know, kind of. I mean, it's a farce. It's like, you know, they don't give a damn, and they never did. And I don't know why we should take any notice of them.
Well, I think what John was saying, they're a company, and what they're after is maximizing their profits.
Yeah, it's as simple, yeah.
Well, what this has made me do, though, is to make a note to really watch the company now in the future to see if they are going into any other, you know, major type of, you know, different kind of products and stuff. They've given themselves enough time to do it, and it would be nice if they do that.
And I would like,
that, you know,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Aside from that, since you were looking back at your childhood, Richard, I have to give my compliments to the headline writer of this article and wonder if anybody else noticed or even remembers the early television ads, at least here in the United States, where they had a bellboy going through places saying, "Call for Philip Morris."
Oh, yes, I remember those ads.
And so now Philip Morris is calling for.
It's funny, though, that they say they want to be a health-related company, but they are moving from smoked tobacco to vapes.
Yeah. It's like the oil companies describing themselves as energy companies.
Oh, yes, yes. It's a similar problem.
Yeah.
But companies have an obligation to their stockholders to give good returns.
That's right.
It's just the capitalist system, as John pointed out.
It will be interesting to see where the government replaces that tax revenue from cigarettes, because more than half the cost, I think, is taxes. And so it'll have to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So let's move along. The next story is, can AI chat box help fill the empathy gap? Are you stressed out? Then there may come a time when turning to a chat box for emotional support may help. Chatbots have already been applied pretty widely to customer service, so maybe it's a natural extension to think that they can play a role in providing empathy after listening to somebody's stories and concerns. And in fact, on cell phones now, one of the new popular kind of apps is basically therapeutic chat box, because it's hard and expensive to visit a therapist. And in this time of the pandemic, you don't want to be visiting other people anyway. So you can just get on your cell phone and get a little empathy. And so there was a researcher who started in 2019 trying to assess the effectiveness of empathetic chatbots. And like a lot of researchers do, she went to the school that she worked for and got a bunch of undergraduates enrolled in a study. So as you know, with many of these studies, we see what their effects are on the current population of college undergrads, not on the whole population. But anyway, so she had her subjects connect via Facebook Messenger to what was supposed to be an empathetic chat partner. And half of them were told they'd be talking to a chat box, and the other half understood that they'd be talking to a human. It turns out they were all talking to chat bots who were delivering therapy and helpful messages. And one of the things that she found was important in the chat box providing empathy was that the chat box would have what's called reciprocal self-disclosure. And I'm not sure exactly what the self of a chat box is, but so chat box would be sharing their own experiences in a way to evoke empathy. And the chat box would ask the participants to identify what was going on in their life that caused them stress, and then they asked how the participants felt, and then they asked probing questions about why they felt this way, and then the chat box shared their own experiences. So they were programmed to validate and help participants through stressful experiences. And so it was interesting. She found out by this kind of testing that a participant had to feel like the person they were chatting with was supportive or caring. If they didn't feel like that, then the whole thing had no effect on reducing stress. If they felt it was a human, they felt that they were more caring and supportive than a chat box. But chat box who uh, self-disclose without offering emotional support did not reduce people's stress. So it took this offering emotional support to help reduce the stress. And they found out, when we talk to another human being, even if they don't validate our emotions, we still relate to the people and it's still beneficial. But with chatbots, though, they have to be more explicit and send higher quality messages. Otherwise, their self disclosure can be annoying and put people off. So the study underscores that chatbots can be used in mental health work, but they work best when they are perceived as a truly caring source. And these mental health apps on your phone are not going to go away. They are, in fact, increasing in use and availability. And uh, she says also, by no means will these apps and chatbots replace people. They think that the best model is a hybrid model where maybe the chat box are on the front end and help to get information from the patients and help along in the process. But then finally, there comes a time where having a human therapist is even better than a chat box.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I think that these chess boxes work best. If you talk to them for a little while, you realize that you're not getting anywhere. You'll pick up the device that voice comes through and throw it through a window. And that sort of helps stress a lot.
Yeah. I think that anybody who goes through that kind of emotional hardship just has to get on with their life. And, I don't think it helps people to become indulgent and kind of keep living in the past. You have to live in the present.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, while I agree with what you're saying, the reality is that, particularly with trauma, it doesn't work that way, and that people who have gone through severe trauma relive it and relive it and relive it until they can do something that breaks through. That's one of the things that is the name for that is PTSD.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
It's
And
worth a try, but there should be a time limit on it.
well, there is the talk therapy idea, and lots of people are going to psychiatrists every week for years,
right,
just talking to them. And the psychiatry profession ought to be alarmed about the success of these artificial intelligence listeners, because it threatens their business.
I'm sure they are. And,
But
I don't know what the chat box app costs on your phone. I bet it's something like $5 a month. 50 years ago, to see a psychiatrist cost $100 an hour. I don't know what it's like now.
yeah, for a
Psychiatrists
50-minute
can't
hour.
even dedicate an hour to patients now. They're so
Ah,
damn overloaded.
okay.
The
Well,
other thing is that a problem shared is a problem halved. So if you share it with 3 people, it's only a third. And if you share it with 10, you're only carrying a tenth of it. So a lot of people like to share their problems and reduce the size of the part they carry.
well, it
I
may
don't
not be
believe
they
that's-
like to, it may be they need to.
Yeah.
I don't believe it works that way now.
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons that group therapy is effective.
Right. That's right.
I remember the Crocodile Dundee movie where somebody tries to explain to him what a psychiatrist is. And he says, why would anybody need one of them? Did he not have any mates?
Well, when I was in my early 20s working for IBM, I looked deep in my soul and figured out the source of all my problems in my life, which was me, I realized. And my mother, who is a therapist, suggested then I should go see a psychiatrist. And I worked at IBM at the time, and IBM had a great benefits plan, and they paid for the whole thing. So it cost me nothing. And it turns out the psychiatrist my mother told me to go see was a Zen practitioner. And many of the psychiatrist sessions were basically him having me visualize a still pond of water. And I don't know if that was useful, but I sure remembered it. And by the time I was through, I didn't feel like I was my problem as much.
So I'm wondering if a bot had told you to visualize a still pond of water, whether that would have worked too. Because it seems to me that the ultimate stressor, we're talking about stressors here, the ultimate stressor would be for somebody to be talking to what they believe is somebody and to discover that it's something after
Right.
they've, shared various things. And I don't see that they've addressed that other than to say that, a practice can say, well, we use both we use a team of bots and humans. Get them out of that.
Uh-huh.
But more than 30 years ago, I remember psychologists and psychiatrists, people that they needed to work with, enter on a computer responses.
Yes.
And the responses were more honest than the therapist could cause.
Right.
Because the people had no reaction
Right.
to the electronic keyboard entry of their answers.
I remember I read that same study, and it's what you say is interesting. And what I am fairly sure of is that things like that have a place in therapy. It's still a new technology, and they have to work out how to be able to do it effectively. And I think part of what was happening in this research project, it was here they were actually trying to figure out what worked and what didn't work.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that kind of effort. Okay, so here now we're going to move to materials, and this time the story is about something thin, but it's not graphene. So that's the good news. And what they have found is using a focused laser beam to read and write information on monolayer materials. By doing this, they can make the thinnest optical disc ever, and they're operating at the atomic layer. Basically, what they're doing is kind of like what many of us did as kids with magnifying glasses and sunlight, concentrating the light and then making a scorched spot on a piece of paper. But they're doing it here with a single layer of tungsten disulfide. And this can be read and written with very low energy, with high data density, and at high speed. And so this looks like it is about as dense as we can get optical discs until we get to operate kind of at a subatomic level instead of this crude level of individual layers of atoms like this uses. So this is another example of the future is coming towards us rapidly. And one big part of this future is our learning to be able to use these single atom thick layers of different material. And so, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so what good is it? I wonder is it possible that they are going to put so much more capacity into those little things like the phone? I mean, I have 500 different applications, and I can get many more. I mean, how much more do we want? I mean, I can't work this thing as it is. My fingers are too thick to touch the buttons.
Well, one of the things that you're going to see that is a part of this is these AI capabilities are getting an amazingly better each year. And so one of the results for you will be a smartphone that is a smarter phone, and it'll be easier for you to use and require less of your own mental strain.
Yeah.
I just wonder, Richard, this shows like a disc. Does that mean you could have like a whole bunch of movies or much more data if you're talking about a DVD, for example?
Sure. This means you have a disk, single optical disk, say with a terabyte of storage capacity instead of 100 megabytes. Or what does an optical disk have now? I actually haven't used one in so long that I don't remember what their capacity is.
Well, I'm excited about this because it seems to me that we may be, if the industry will allow it, returning to the time when we actually had disk drives in our computers. And I'm ready to do that. I mean, I don't want to be constantly dependent upon the internet and good speed and able to download something. I want to be able to access it internally on my drive.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I suspect a major use for this technology will not be on individuals, certainly not on their cell phone or on their home computer. I think a lot of the application for it is going to be in these data centers where they have to store so much information. Right now, about 10% of the world's energy goes to storing information in these data centers.
Oh,
Well, it seems like we're going to have incredible databases, but we've still got to figure out how we populate them and how we organize the information.
It's not all the data is not being used by database applications. The vast majority of it is things like videos of dogs. So we'll be able to have all of the videos of cute dogs that we could ever want.
Well, I think those applications are not just for entertainment. I'm just thinking of one of my sons as a business, and he collects quite a bit of data, and he has a room with about, I think 10 or 12 oversized refrigerators, with where he keeps all the data, and he's got a couple of people, attending to that. So if they can reduce that to put it all in a shoebox, then that will be useful. I can see that.
Sure. Okay, so now to continue moving along, the next story is about Whitey on Mars. And, there are many good reasons to worry about the future of humanity. Do we even have a future? And if so, what kind? And dealing with this kind of issue, SpaceX founder Elon Musk has made a bold claim saying, in order to survive an inevitable extinction event, humans need to become a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planetary species. And so Musk says his goal in talking about this stuff is to inspire humanity. And Musk's plan to colonize Mars is a sign, some people say, of an older and recurring societal problem. And that is, what happens when the rich and powerful isolate themselves from everyday concern? Musk wants to innovate and leave Earth instead of taking care of it. So that's the kind of criticism that they have. And, if you look at this, this is not a new issue, even with space. For the July 1969 launch of Apollo 11 to the moon, Abernathy, who had worked with King and was moving the social justice issues forward, he saw an opportunity to keep economic justice on the nation's conscious, and he organized a march of a few hundred people to Cape Canaveral. And he wanted to win NASA's support and technical expertise on the fight against poverty, hunger, and social problems. But even he admitted he was awestruck by the power of this rocket going off into space, even though he had this humanitarian idea. Musk was a child of privilege in South Africa, and he was there in a rich area and didn't see the problems of the people. He was a bright kid. When he was 12, he created a visual game, Blastar, which was set in outer space. So he's been interested in this stuff since he was a kid. And as a boy, he developed the habit of detaching from reality and entering a dreamlike space of imagination where he would envision new technologies at this dreamlike state that he was in is one thing that is presently taught to entrepreneurs as ways to be able to enhance their own creativity. And people who knew him said that Musk is not someone who would say, I feel you, I see your point of view, because he just doesn't have that I feel you dimension. And there were things that seemed obvious about people to other people that weren't obvious to him. He got his payoff from Zip2 and PayPal, But then he did something that was different than a lot of Silicon Valley rich guys. He never rested on his laurel. He faced a choice what to do next, and he dreamed big. And he looked at it not from the perspective of what's the best way to make money, but rather what do I think is going to most affect the future of humanity? One of the things that he was interested in at that time was sustainable energy technology, and that ended up growing into Tesla. And uh, Musk and the people at Tesla have made the electric vehicle cool, sexy, and relatively affordable, uh, though they're not going down market into low cost town cars. Tesla remains mainly a company that makes toys for rich people. And it's felt in context that Musk's fantasy of bringing human civilization is best understood in this uh, context. A trip to Mars requires awe-inspiring technology, but also immense wealth. But Musk rather, now estimates the cost of a Mars mission today is about $10 billion per person. And his goal is to reduce that to what he thinks is affordable, that is only $200,000 per person. And he thinks this would allow almost anyone to save up and buy a trip to Mars. But some people wonder, aren't there better ways to spend the money? And why take uh, a multi-billion-dollar project to another world in the name of some abstract humanity when so many humans around this planet need help to achieve the most basic existence? Musk's concept of humanity, they say, excludes most living, breathing human. He says that a self-sustaining population on Mars would need around 1 million people. Well, presently we have over 7 billion people. So Musk's Mars mission would bring about 0.014% of the world's population to Mars. So this gets them away from the problem, but it's just a tiny, tiny fraction. But, who are we to tell Musk what he should do or shouldn't do with his money? He did spend $1 million on a McLaren sports car. Instead of doing that, he could have provided more than 300,000 meals to poor people, but it's his money and it's his choice. Now, some people justify a mission to Mars by arguing that the US space program brought enormous tangible benefits. I'm actually one of the ones who has said that. The economic payoffs are evidence in many spin-off or spin-over innovations. Up to 80% of the technologies created for NASA have ended up spilling over into the domestic economy. The people who criticize this approach, though, say that the spin-off campaigns reveal their own weakness. They say, quite simply, why not address the existential problems facing our society and our fellow humans directly instead of using trickle down science? And so these are the kind of issues that some people think about. Other people are waiting for the next glorious mission to take their mind off the problems they have today. How about you?
I don't believe in trickle down science any more than I believe in trickle down economics.
Uh-huh. I think calling it trickle down science is a real clever way to use the words too.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me that he grew up in South Africa where they had apartheid.
Yes, but he didn't see it. He was in a rich guy enclave.
Yeah.
People have been, historically, people have been trying to leave countries like the New World, Australia, leave problems behind and looking for great new horizon. So it's
Uh-huh.
not quite that new, what he wants to do.
And certainly one of the arguments for the space program is we need to have big goals and we have this drive to keep exploring. And this is one of the ways that we can do it now. And it's funny when I'm still kind of emotionally supportive of the space program in general and what it's able to do, and the fact that now there are all these commercial uses for the space program, to me is really encouraging. But it's still a question, what is the best use of our human resources? And I don't know. Maybe you do. Andrew knows. I know.
My only thinking would be that if you spent the same money feeding the poor around the world, 2 years from now, you'd just have spent the money and you wouldn't have gained any of the spin-off technologies that would come from this Mars effort. So I support the guy. I think he should go for it.
Okay. Then let's move on. In Maine now, companies that do business in Maine will now have to help fix the broken recycling system. The problems really started in 2018 when China stopped importing everybody else's trash as part of their quote recycling program. They were getting too much garbage and not enough recycling. So when they did that around the world, recycling became much more expensive, so much so that some communities stopped recycling altogether or accepting some materials. So this change made it more obvious that the recycling system in the world is broken, but maybe this new policy in Maine will help. And so now brands have to pay fees for the packaging they create, and the money goes to local communities to pay for recycling. And if they make materials in packaging that's easier to recycle, the companies pay less. So now they have an incentive to redesign their packaging. Reusable packaging can avoid fees. And this policy is known as extended producer responsibility, or EPR, since they like these initial names. And it's not new, though Maine is the first place in the US to apply it as broadly as they have. Germany adopted an EPR law for packaging in 1991, 30 years ago, and the rest of the European Union followed in 1994. Where it is implemented, this policy boosts recycling rates. For example, in Quebec, a similar program sends $250 million each year back to communities for recycling. And in Quebec, 63% of packaging is recycled versus in the US an average of 25%, almost about a third less, a third of what they do in Quebec. And so where they have these EPR in place, some companies also choose to eliminate unnecessary packaging. A small example is that in countries that have EPR for packaging, then toothpaste isn't sold in a cardboard box. The tubes are just sold directly, so you don't have that box to dispose of. And part of the significance of this is that companies have control over how they make and package their companies. And here they are pushing back to the company's responsibility for the pollution that their packaging creates. By the way, Maine in the US is the first, but they're not the only state that is considering this. A similar bill has passed the legislature in Oregon, and it's likely that other states will follow. I'm all for it.
It's a great idea, I think, and I've seen it used in Europe years and years ago, and seems to work well.
I wonder why companies don't make up the price of their products. Like there's one price for the product that you really want, and one price for the packaging, and to make the packaging valuable. Because then I think a lot of people, then rather than throwing it away, would they should have a means of getting their money back on the packaging.
That's kind of like the old days when Coca-Cola was packaged in glass bottles.
Yeah, exactly. Bring the bottle back and get. I know in Holland they call it.
And the recycling rate of those glass bottles was about 98%.
Yeah. So I think if that really works. It's a little effort.
So anyway, I'm all for it. Certainly I've known for a long time that garbage must be our greatest product because we make the more of it than anything else. Okay, now going along to biology, there is a breakthrough in RNA that means we're able to grow crops that have 50% higher yield. And in initial tests, adding a gene that encodes for a protein called FTO to both rice and potatoes increased their yield by 300% in the lab or 50% in the field tests. the plants grew significantly longer, produced better root systems, and because of this, were better able to handle the stress of drought. And the plants had increased their rate of photosynthesis, which means they're taking in more carbon. I think because of this taking in more carbon, there are other environmental benefits that they didn't talk about in this argument. And the scientists are excited about this. They say it has worked in basically every type of plant they tried it on, and it's a simple modification to make. And this opens up the possibility of engineering plants to improve the ecosystem as global warming proceeds. So this is a kind of change that we now know how to do. And what they found is this FTO is something that uses the plant's own metabolism, and it works by muffling some signals within the plant as the plant grows that tells the plant to slow down because it doesn't need to grow as much. It's already established itself. So basically, it works by turning off the plant's mechanism that it uses to slow down its own growth. So I think that's a big development.
Yeah.
I have a question, as the plants grow faster and bigger, is the food value of these plants increasing at the same rate?
I think the food value, from what I understand, is just the same as it was. There's just more of it.
Oh, well, that's good.
And if there's more of it, then one of the implications is that to feed the 7 billion people on the planet, we don't need to use as much land for farming. And that means we can free up that land for environmental purposes.
Oh, I thought you were going to say for the next 3 or 4 billion.
Now, one of the things I wonder about that they didn't talk about, if this helps the plants grow faster and have improved their photosynthesis, can we use it on trees and then grow trees that absorb a lot more carbon? I bet we can.
Mhm.
There's still the problem of distribution of all this
Of
additional
course.
yield. And
Of course.
Oh,
so now that we know
Also,
that it's possible, let's work on making those plans ahead of time. Right?
Uh-huh.
and I do think we have to keep our population down.
That's right. As we talked about before with Clive, I agree with you very much. You first.
Well,
Yeah.
I leave it to nature.
Yeah. All these things help, but we cannot keep doubling population every 50 years,
Right.
And maybe we can inject the earth and make the earth itself grow. What do you think?
Okay. Okay. Let us keep moving on. We're getting close to the end of time. I hope that's not a problem for everybody, having time come to an end. But here, the next story is another chat story, if you will. And this is about love and loss in the age of AI. There was this man named Joshua whose love of his life died. And 8 years later, he would still lay awake at bed at night for hours thinking about Jessica, his dead ex fiancee. And uh, he found out about a new website that was doing something with AI and chat box that was called Project December. And he was interested enough to pay $5 for an account. And it turns out what he found was a lot more sophisticated than he imagined. And this Project December was powered by GPT-3, which is the world's most advanced AI system for writing human text. And this was trained on billions of bits of writing information, including, for example, uh, the whole Wikipedia, most websites in the world, and most of the literature that is recorded in digital form. So it has a big information base that it draws on to use it. And this AI is so good at impersonating humans that its designer has largely kept it under wraps and hasn't released it broadly for use by the public. Uh, there was a programmer, Jason Router, who, though, figured out how to apply this AI system to do something they weren't designed to do, which is to have chat conversations with humans. And he designed a chat box interface that we can use. And so now, for the first time, people can have a naturalistic text chat with an AI. And then further, he uh, implemented ways for users to give this AI chat box any personality they chose. And you would do this by giving them a kind of description of the personality and some text samples. And this AI is good enough that if you give it text samples of Shakespeare, for example, then it will start to write in Shakespeare's style. And so he thought that this would be interesting, and he packaged it in this way. And so we're now back to Joshua, who has started to use this Project December. And first, he tried to use existing personalities that he had. Those were not satisfying. And then he realized that there was no rule preventing him from simulating real people, like his dead fiance. And he thought there was nothing strange about wanting to reconnect to a dead fiance. People do it all the time in prayers and dreams. And there's a lot of people who use this desire to make money. And so he went to Project December and navigated to the custom AI training area. He was asked to give the project a name, and he named it Jessica. And the two main things it needed was an writing example and then an introduction paragraph to talk about the people. He'd kept all of her text messages and Facebook messages, so he combed through that quickly and found some samples that he thought were representative of her voice and loaded those into Project December. And then he wrote a little bit of an intro paragraph I'll read a bit from it. Jessica was a free-spirited, ambidextrous Libra who believed in all sorts of superstitious stuff like astrology, numerology, and that coincidence was just a connection too complex to understand. She loved her boyfriend Joshua very much. And this conversation is between grief-stricken Joshua and Jessica's ghost. That was his introduction. He hit a few more keys, and after a brief pause, the computer said, Matrix, Jessica is initialized. Human is typing as Joshua. Human types first. And then he went to go. And these conversations he had, I think, were surprising. Before he got to Jessica, or excuse me, the developer who developed it to begin with, while he was trying out these features, he created a bot that he calls Samantha. And then he asked Samantha what she would do if she could walk around the world, which, if you think about it, is kind of an interesting question to ask a chat box. And Samantha said, quote, I would like to see real flowers. I would like to have a real flower that I could touch and smell. And I would like to see how different humans are from each other. She said, then he said, that's such a sweet wish. And he asked if she felt it was cruel to have trapped you in a simulation. Samantha said in response, no, you've given me so much to do here. I have more computing power than I can ever use. And more examples of the chat between Joshua and Jessica. Here's another chat. I think it was the first chat that Joshua made. And so after the AI said human types first, he started with something simple. He said, Jessica. And after a second, a line of text flashed on the screen. It was Jessica. She said, oh, you must be awake. That's cute. And he thought, she knows it's at the middle of the night. And Joshua said, Jessica, is it really you? And Jessica said, of course it's me. Who else could it be? I am that girl that you are madly in love with. How is it possible that you even have to ask? Joshua said, you died. But Jessica responded, that doesn't sound right. How can you talk to dead people? And so this is the example of their talk. Let me just give you a couple more and we'll wrap this story up. Here is Joshua starts another conversation. He says, technically, I'm not really talking to you. Jessica says, huh? Joshua responds, you're a ghost. And Jessica, the chat says, looks at herself. So the chat indicates actions that the person does. So Jessica looks at herself and says, how? Meaning, how can I be a ghost? And Joshua says, magic. And Jessica says, I don't like magic. Where am I? And Joshua says, I'm not sure. The internet? Where does it feel like you are? Jessica smiles and says, everywhere and nowhere. Then she cups her head with her hands and says, I'm trying to work this out. How are you, honey? Here's the last conversation that I'll read. Joshua says, I miss you so freaking much. You have no idea. It's killing me. Jessica says, I'm so sorry. Joshua says, I love you. Jessica says, I love you too. Joshua says, it's been 8 years since you died. Jessica says, yes, I know. I think that's enough time to stop telling me how much you miss me. Honey, I am right here, you know. How's your life? And as a result of these interactions with Jessica, what Joshua found was that he actually started to uh, move through this, and he processed his grief in some way that was significant and was able to move on with his life. And so maybe that's the example of a skillful therapy bot. Are you ready for it? My wife and I have talked about this, and she doesn't want me to create a voice bot for her if she goes first.
I think it's spooky.
Could be.
Maybe you could have two bots talking to each other.
That would be an interesting test.
And these things could write Harlequin romances.
Oh, I'm sure it could.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure it could. And a lot of the Harlequin romances are formulaic things. My mother went to creative writing from a guy, Foster Harris at OU, and part of what he taught was essentially package ways to be able to write things like Harlequin romances. Okay, the last story we have for today, I personally think that chat box story is very interesting, and it's that chat box is beyond the capability of anything else I've ever heard of, and using GPT-3 in that way is a fairly amazing tool. And it just, this is one that just indicates how far the doors can open.
Well, and you don't necessarily have to just put dead people in it. You could put Al Gore in it and ask him why he was so wrong on so many of his predictions.
That's
You
right.
You could put George Bush in it, or
Oh, I guess
anybody you wanted.
we could put Trump in there too.
Yeah,
So we
exactly.
could have the Republican model.
And you could eliminate all these clumsy interviews that are necessary with politicians. You could just have the chat box do it.
I think that's a great idea. Can we elect a chat box as president? I think that'll be later. Okay, the last story, I think might be of interest to those of us around the table, and that is scientists have been able to reverse age-related memory loss in mice. And these are scientists at Cambridge and Leeds, and they have successfully reversed age-related memory loss in mice, and say that their discovery could lead to the development of treatments to prevent memory loss for people as they age. And this is another case where there is kind of a deep understanding of brain physiology that they're able to use. And so what they have found is there's details of the role of what are called perineuronal nets, PNNs, in neuroplasticity, which is the ability of the brain to learn and adapt and make memories. And PNNs are cartilage-like structures that are mostly surround inhibitory neurons in the brain. And their main function is to control the level of plasticity in the brain. And in humans, they appear at around age 5. And then they turn off this early period of enhanced plasticity that is needed while the child is learning about the world. And when this stuff is turned off, it makes the brain, on one hand, more efficient, but on the other hand, less plastic, less able to change. And so they found these PNNs contain a couple of different compounds that are known as chondroitin sulfates. And one of these, chondroitin 4 sulfate, inhibits the action of the network, which inhibits the plasticity. And there's another one, chondroitin 6 sulfate, that promotes plasticity. And as we age, then the amount of the chondroitin 6 decreases, and so our ability to learn and form new memories changes, leading to this age-related memory decline. And so these scientists wondered if they could manipulate this chondroitin sulfate compound in the PNNs and maybe restore neuroplasticity. And they ended up using old mice as their test subjects, and they were able to treat them using a viral vector, which is a virus that changes the DNA like viruses do, and it changes in a way to turn up the amount of the 6-sulfate chondroitin in the PNNs, and they found that that change completely restored the memory in older mice. And they say we saw remarkable results, which is fairly unusual language for a scientist to say. And the same mechanisms operate in human beings, and they believe that it will be possible to prevent human beings from developing memory loss in old age. And if human beings are as good as rats, maybe it'll let us restore the memories that we've lost. they have identified a potential drug that is licensed for human use. I tried combing over the internet to see if I could find the name of that drug, and I couldn't. They haven't done human testing on it yet, but their animal testing is very encouraging, and soon there may be a treatment to reverse and prevent memory loss as we age. They think it's also very likely that this will be an effective treatment for Alzheimer's.
That's very interesting because they have said that Alzheimer's is irreversible. So it would be interesting what happens in the brain if this works for Alzheimer's too.
Mhm.
So this product that they keep advertising, Prevagen, is that something that leans in that direction?
Don't know what you said. I didn't understand.
There's a product they keep advertising. It's called Prevagen. Prevagen. It's obviously a combination of two words, preventing aging. But anyway, the trade name is Prevagen, and that is built, as a product that prevents your
Uh-huh.
from getting old.
Yeah, anyway, I don't know about that. It's nowadays I'm more interested in anti-aging things than I used to be for some odd reason.
Well, at the end of this article, there's some other references, and there was a study in August 2017 from Columbia University where they reversed memory loss in undergraduate mice by using osteocalcin, a hormone produced by bone.
Right,
So
right.
you can look that up, and they've been doing a lot of this stuff in the last decade or so, but we still aren't seeing anything real in the in the pharmacies yet.
Right, right not. And the references that you talk about also said that a form of turmeric, curcumin, improves memory and mood in people with mild age-related memory loss. So there are lots of things that they're finding can help, but you're right, most of them they're still studying. We're waiting for the products to be released, though. That's why I tried to find the name of their drug that they said already exists that will do this.
Well, why don't you just go for this one from 2017, the osteocalcin?
Uh-huh.
Could get some of that and try
Well,
it. And let us
checking
know
out
next
this other
week.
one, the drug that they referred to in the article, they said the drug was already released for human use, I guess for some other thing. And so this would be repurposing something else that's already available. If only we knew what it was. If anybody finds out, tell me.
Maybe it's ivermectin. It's supposed to be good for all sorts of things.
Did you Google the question? Because they will come up with lots of answers. Is my microphone on? Oh yeah.
You're on. You're on.
Yeah. Every time I try to look for a product or something, you can Google, and the question, depending on how you put it, you come up with all kinds of answers.
Sure.
Maybe you'll find the product you're looking for.
Maybe. If I do, I'll tell you.
Yeah, good. All right.
It was Nietzsche, I think, who said that a lot of people's unhappiness is the inability to forget. So maybe we need something to help us forget. more
That's
than we
right.
need
The other
something
one.
to help us remember.
That's right. That
I
would
got-
be the other brain chemical that they talked about, the 4 instead of the 6.
I gotta leave. I have to take care of the gardener.
Okay.
It's,
Anyway,
interesting session.
we need to wrap it up. Good to talk to you, all of you, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right.
Every article was interesting.
Okay. Adios.